Hi, welcome to section 1.4. We're going to measure angles in this section. So we're going to talk about naming angles, measuring angles, and angle measure facts. So let's first name some angles. First of all, what is an angle? An angle is simply two rays with the same endpoint. So basically, if I had, here's one ray, and here's another ray, and they meet at an endpoint right here, that would be an angle. Now we can name angles three different ways. So let me make three different angles. Okay, the first way that we can name an angle is by its arc. So what I mean by the arc is basically how much it measures, but we'll just call that arc X. So then we call this angle X. Another way that we can measure it by measuring is naming it by its vertex. So if here's its vertex and I call it E, I could call that angle E. And the third way is if we had 3 points. So if I had a point here, here, and here, and we'll call this A, B, and C. The key is that the vertex always has to be in the middle, so we could call this angle ABC, or we could call this angle CBA. It doesn't matter. So that's how you name angles. Alright, now we have a whole bunch of different types of angles. The first angle that we're going to talk about is a straight angle. Straight angle is simply a straight line, and its measure is 180 degrees. That's a straight angle. Now we have some other angles. We have what's called an acute angle. That's an angle that measures less than 90 degrees. So an example of an acute angle would look like this. A right angle measures exactly 90 degrees. And we use a little box to denote 90 degrees. An obtuse angle measures between 90 degrees and 180. So that would be obtuse. A reflex angle might be something that's new to you. Let's say I have this obtuse angle right here. A reflex angle measures between 180 and 360 degrees. So basically what it is it's this measure kind of on the outside. So if you look, it would be greater than 180 and less than 360. Another way that might look, let's say I have this acute angle and I wanted the reflex angle that's with this one. So it would be the outside. Okay, those are reflex angles. Okay, full rotations. A full rotation is simply all the way around. So if I had a line, and if I would take that line and rotate it all the way around, it would make an angle that would be 360 degrees. So that's what we mean by a full rotation, all the way around. Alright, supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. They don't have to be connected together. So let's say that I had this angle, and let's say it was 40 degrees. Okay, and let's say that I had this angle, and this angle was 140 degrees. These two are supplementary because 40 degrees plus 140 degrees equals 180 degrees. So we can write it like that. Another way that you may have seen them before is if they're called adjacent supplementary angles. Adjacent supplementary angles means that those are just angles that they share a point, a vertex. So here's my two angles here. And let's say that this was 40 and then this was 140 degrees. Okay, those are still supplementary angles because they add up to 180 degrees. It doesn't matter how the picture is drawn, but keep in mind it can be two separate angles. Alright, so complementary angles work the same way except they're 90 degrees. So if I had a 40-degree angle again, and then I made another angle, but this one was 50 degrees, then 40 degrees plus 50 degrees equals 90 degrees, and that would be complementary. And we can also do the same thing. Here's my 90-degree angle, and if I just draw a line that goes in there, now these are adjacent because they share a vertex, but let's say that this one is 30 degrees and this one is 60 degrees. 60 degrees plus 30 degrees equals 90 degrees. So you can see that those are also complementary. Adjacent angles, which I was kind of showing with adjacent angles, are there two angles with the same vertex and they share a side. So basically, here's my big overall angle, and now I have two angles. I have this inside angle right here, and I have this other angle right there, the outside. So we can say that if we'll call this X and we'll call this Y, we say that angle X and angle Y are adjacent. And that's because they share a vertex and a side. Congruent angles mean that they are exactly the same measure. So if I have an angle, and let's say that that's 40 degrees, and we'll call this angle A. I have another angle, it's also 40 degrees, and we'll call that angle B. They are congruent, so we write it like this. Angle A is congruent to angle B. Okay? So those are the different types of angles. And now we have what's called a bisector. A bisector is a ray that separates the angle into adjacent angles with equal measure. So let's say that I have this angle right here, and I have a bisector that goes right in between them. It's not very straight, but that's okay. If, and we'll put a vertex right there. If it splits it directly in half, so let's just say that this is 41 degrees, and if this measure is also 41 degrees, then we're saying that, and we'll call this A, B, and we'll call this C and D. We say that ray AB bisects angle CAD because it splits it directly in half. Okay, that's how we do that. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about measuring some angles. So let's measure some angles. I have two angles. We're going to first talk about measuring acute and obtuse angles. We're going to start with an obtuse angle because remember, obtuse means that it's between 90 and 360. And so I am looking for my protractor, which I have one right here. Here's my protractor. Excellent. Whenever you measure an angle, you're going to put the vertex right here in the middle at the bottom. See if I can move it there. And now what you're going to do is you're going to start where your line is, and you're going to go around your protractor until you get to where you're at. Now, you gotta use a little common sense because we got two sets of numbers here. We have numbers up here, and this would say this is about a 45 degree angle, but it's not because it's bigger. But you always have to start at 0. So 0 is starting on the inside because on the outside it's 180. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130. about 134 degrees is what this angle is. So let's see if I can move my protractor. Move it to this one. So if we wanted to label this, and I'll label this angle A, B, C, we would say that the measure of angle A, B, C, let that go, I'm sorry, is equal to, what did I say, 134 degrees, I think is what I said. And that's how you measure it. Okay, and the same thing with acute angles. You would do the same idea. So I'm not going to do an acute angle because I think it's the same. But what we are going to do is we are going to do a reflex angle. So remember, when we measure obtuse and acute angles, we're measuring the inside, so to speak. If we're going to talk about a reflex angle, we're going to be measuring the outside. So that would be this distance around. Takes a little bit more thinking, but it's okay. So you're going to put the protractor in the same spot. Now, this time, you could do one of two things. You know from that if we would draw a line here, let's see if I can draw this line, that this measures from here to there 180 degrees. So basically what you have to do is find this little piece right there. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can see that from here to there is 10, 20, 30, 40, 46 degrees. So we have 46 degrees here. And remember what I said about this? This is 180 degrees. So we simply take 180 degrees, we add our 46 degrees, and we'll get the measure of our reflex angle. So that becomes 226 degrees, which makes perfect sense because it has to be between 180 and 360. So that will be how you measure reflex angles. You got to just make sure that you add on your 180. Okay, so we've got a couple more things to talk about. Our third objective is angle measurement facts. So our first fact is straight angles measure 180 degrees and right angles measure 90 degrees. So in other words, here's a straight angle. We're just simply saying it will always measure 180 degrees. And here we have a right angle, and we're saying that that will always measure 90 degrees. And the next step, we'll bring this down. The measure of adjacent angles adds up. Okay, what that means is this. If I have two adjacent angles, so here's my big angle, and I want to draw a line in here. So adjacent angles, remember, are two angles that are basically side by side. They share a side and a point. What I'm saying is if this is angle A and this is angle B, then together I can add them together and get angle C. So I'm saying that angle A plus angle B equals angle C. That's all it's saying. You add the two parts together to get the whole. And the third fact is there is an angle with any specific measure between 0 and 360 degrees. What that means is you can measure any angle and it will always be within 0 and 360 degrees. It will never be more than that, and it will never be negative numbers. So, all right, that is section 1.4 about angles. Thank you very much.